I promise you my new gimmick is not just being ultra negative. I suppose this video could be spun either very negatively about Gotham Knights or extremely positively about Batman Arkham Knight. So it's up to how you view it. I'm going glass half full here. And to prove it to you, one of my next videos in the next couple weeks is actually going to be me looking at Gotham Knights. I'm going to do a top 5 on things I think Gotham Knights actually did better than Arkham, believe it or not. Don't unsubscribe yet. I genuinely think I have a few good points. Just wait for it. Then I'm going to go through and do the opposite of things I think Arkham did better. Because I think there's been a lot of comparisons drawn, especially since WB Games Montreal did make Arkham Origins. So I do think there's a lot to talk about there. And I've been slowly inching my way through the game over on Degenerate Plays. So if you're interested in checking that out, the link to that channel is down below. And over here as well on Degenerate J, our channel memberships are now up with that join button. So if you like what you hear, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and if you're interested in supporting us that way, it helps us out a ton. But looking at Arkham Knight and Gotham Knights, I know they're not the same game, and you could argue even that Gotham Knights is not a Batman game. It is a game taking place in a Batman-centered world, mostly without him. I do still think there are some points of comparison that can very easily be made when it comes to things like Traversal. I think when it comes down to it, when Arkham Knight first came out, everyone, myself included, was a little hard on the Batmobile. And while hindsight is 20/20, and I do still think there are a lot of very fair criticisms when it comes to how much the Batmobile was implemented, something I wanted to talk about today is how well it ran compared to the Batcycles in Gotham Knights. So one element of this comparison I want to hit right off the bat is just the functionality of the vehicle. When it comes to Arkham Knight, yes, there was a lot of criticisms, like I said before, about how much it was actually in the game, how much you had to use the Batmobile for things like Riddler puzzles and races and actually getting through the story. But the vehicle actually functioned extremely well, especially for a studio that wasn't actually used to making vehicle-based gameplay. You could take tight turns by either drifting or quickly switching to battle mode. You could use battle mode in combat to take down enemies, fight tanks, which I know is a point of contention, among other things, as well as actually incorporating it into your free flow combat when you're outside and doing instant takedowns. And of course as well, the Batmobile had a wide plethora of upgrades that could actually make it play better, be more interesting, and become more powerful. When it comes to the Batcycle, it has pretty much none of these things. There's really no noticeable upgrades in terms of your time spent with the Batcycle. It doesn't actually do that much, even though you are constantly reminded by Alfred that Batman left all of the tools at your disposal that you would need in order to win your war on crime. Except the Batmobile. When moving through the world itself as well, there was a lot of interactivity with the Batmobile in Arkham Knight compared to the Gotham Knights Batcycles. When you were actually cutting corners, if you would hit buildings or maybe scrape along things, surfaces would be destroyed. You could take out the corners of buildings. You weren't going to Man of Steel it and bring down entire towers or anything crazy. This wasn't, the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction. But it was something where it interacted in a somewhat believable way with the world. When it comes to Gotham Knights, the Batcycle doesn't do that at all. When you actually bump into things, you pretty much just bump into them. You bounce off of them. There's really no physics interaction with the things you're running into. And of course, a big part of that is because of the speed, which we're going to get to in a minute. But there really aren't very many breakables in the entire world either. When you're actually running into things, small signs and fire hydrants will get destroyed, but actual walls and gates and things like fences, they're a lot more rare to actually break through. A lot of it is just set in stone, literally. And yes, it does have collision detection, but it doesn't have any sort of destructibility to it. So when you actually have that collision with an item in Gotham Knights, a lot of the times what you're going to do is just lightly bounce off of it. It's even worse in co-op, where if you're actually playing as the co-op partner, it's not your server, not your world, you're joining a host, you are likely to bump into things and have those things actually just disappear from the game. I know Jill was kind of showing me before when she was playing, because we almost always play in my server for the game, when she bumps into cars, sometimes they just will disappear. Other times they will just basically stop her in her tracks and she won't be able to move at all. The problems aren't that glaring when you're the host. I haven't seen very many assets just disappear. I have seen the game crash when I'm walking around as Nightwing, which is something I pointed out before, but there's not a lot of just disappearing items for the host. Still though, it is a little inexcusable to have a game actually pretty much 7 years later after the previous Arkham game come out, which showed kind of how a superhero game could incorporate a vehicle, whether we love it or not, and showed how it could interact with the world, but then your game comes out 7 years later and it has almost no interactivity with the world around it. On top of that, I think the most glaring issue with the Batcycle compared to the Batmobile is the issue of speed. So for example, I had resident James Bond lore expert, friend of the channel, Seth, do a little research for me because he had the time to do this, and I very much appreciate him doing it, where he booted up both Arkham Knight and he booted up Gotham Knights and saw how quickly he could get from point to point in each game. It's worth mentioning that there are performance differences between these games, and it is not the same map, so the best thing we could essentially do together was go to straightaways, as straight away as you could make it, and go 1,000 meters and see how long it would actually take. Now, one of the most interesting things I think was the timing of what actually happened. If you were going to go 1,000 meters in Gotham Knights, it takes around 50 to 55 seconds. It can take more, it can take less, but we're just talking a straightaway, about 55-ish seconds. But in Arkham Knight, without using the afterburner boost at all, it only takes about 20 seconds. So no afterburner, nothing. That's just going without any boost. You're still making the same distance in less than half of the time. It takes almost 3 times as long with the Batcycle to actually get from point A to point B going 1,000 meters in a straightaway than it does with the Arkham Knight Batmobile, and that's without the afterburner boost. With the afterburner boost, it would be even faster. One thing to note is that boosting with the Batmobile is effective, but it doesn't actually add as much speed as you'd think, meaning that boosting all the way to 1,000 meters only actually cuts off a couple of seconds here, basically 1 or 2 seconds, because it actually caps out at about the same speed-ish, just a little faster. And now, if you're using boosts along with drifting, especially in the closed courses, of course it will be much, much, much faster. Because drifting actually brings back your boost, allowing you to kind of boost incrementally and go faster and faster. But the thing with a straightaway is it doesn't allow that. So what I'm saying is, even with the technical limitations of the Batmobile, working on a straightaway instead of moving around different racetracks with drifting, replenishing, it's still much, much faster. And even without any boost, it's still literally about 2/3 of the time to go 1,000 meters. It's also worth noting that Gotham Knights does technically have a bigger map than Arkham Knight, meaning if it is slower to drive, that makes it take way, way, way longer to get from point A on the map to point B if you're trying to get to the other side of the map. It's just ridiculously, ridiculously long, and honestly, it's just frustrating. Overall, there are a plethora of other problems with the believability of the Batcycle, even though this is a superhero game and you're supposed to kind of take it, I should say, at face value and not read too deeply into it. I do think it's worth mentioning that you are a vigilante in a world where there are people who have powers, and pretty much everybody has a gun. And when you actually look at it, it doesn't make any sense that heroes barely moving faster than normal civilian cars wouldn't just get picked off by sniper rounds. It really makes no sense when you actually look at how the game plays, and because of that, I know I said it in a previous video, but I really, really am convinced that the Gotham Knights Traversal was nerfed hard during development. I really do believe that at one point you were supposed to be able to move around this world much, much faster, and that had to change because of the poor performance and frame rate of the game. I mean, we already saw the game had to get dropped on last-gen versions, despite being promised, because they couldn't make it run well enough. And now, of course, we are seeing that the game doesn't run super well on current-gen hardware either. Again, there are things that I think are actually more fun in Gotham Knights. Not a lot, but some things that I think it does even better, believe it or not, which I will talk about in the next couple weeks here. But overall, I really do love Arkham. I love, obviously, that franchise. And actually, at the end of the day, I still really like Gotham Knights. I know a lot of people don't. I know it's not for a lot of people. And I'm not going to sit here and excuse away the problems of the game. Overall, I think it's a fun game. I think it is a fun distraction game for me. And I've seen a lot of other people point out that there's a lot of other things that you could play that are better. And honestly, I'm inclined to agree. Am I just a sucker for these characters? Yeah, absolutely. Do I certainly like playing as Batgirl for various reasons? Yes. But at the end of the day, I do think there's a lot of problems when it comes to the traversal of the game and the Batcycle specifically, and I wanted to make a video about that as well to cover that element of the traversal because it's something that I find a little inexcusable in a world of games where there is so much powerful and interesting traversal in the superhero video game genre. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Please be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I do plan to cover this game more and talk about more things. I promise you not all of my thoughts on Gotham Knights are negative. I do have some fun, interesting things to talk about, I think, and I know a lot of other creators don't talk about the game anymore and just didn't really like it. That's totally fine. I really do like some things in the game, and there are certainly elements of characters and other stuff that I think is really, really cool. So I do still plan to talk about it. It's just something where I've been kind of making my way through it slowly, talking about it as I have actual thoughts that I think are at least somewhat intelligent, or at least not below average intelligence, and going from there. If you're interested in supporting the channel, we do have a Patreon. We do also have as well a secondary channel, Degenerate Plays, and both that channel and this channel, Degenerate J, have channel memberships that you can join to get access to exclusive goodies, including exclusive emojis that you can use down below in the comments, and other things including early access to videos and exclusive videos depending on the tier. And of course as well, my wife Jill has a very wonderful, awesome shop, enchantedglamour.com. That's enchantedglamor.com, where she sells fine handcrafted jewelry and of course as well resin pieces from repurposed comic books and other art, the things that are recycled that she prevents from going in landfills that I think are really, really awesome. And finally, she has her own channel, Magical Jill, where I've been on there as well with her reviewing toys and doing other stuff as well. So I hope to see you on one of those things because it means the world to us, especially in a very uneven and hard to predict YouTube landscape. So I want to say a huge thank you to some of our supporters as well over on Patreon. First off, we have Jonah, Jaden, Gervaris, and Mark K. And then, of course, we do also have channel members through the purrs of my cat. I would also like to thank Michael, as well as Angelo, D.A. Blizzard, and Nolan North. So thank you all very, very much. I appreciate you so, so much. I hope you all have a fantastic day. And as always, everyone, stay shway.